Navy SEAL Clint Emerson talks about his book, 100 Deadly Skills, is up next on episode 144 of Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The Top 7 Paths to Freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranonthemove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. Do you know what to do in an active shooter situation, or how to apply trauma medicine after a catastrophic event? In his New York Times bestseller, 100 Deadly Skills, retired Navy SEAL Clint Emerson focused on showing the predator mindset. In his newest book, 100 Deadly Skills Survival Edition, The SEAL Operative's Guide to Surviving in the Wild and Being Prepared for Any Disaster, he demonstrates how to survive in the wild and defend ourselves from present danger. All right, Clint Emerson, thanks for being here on Veteran on the Move. And before we get to talking about business and entrepreneurship, you take us back a little ways and tell us about what you did in the Navy as a Navy SEAL.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. I was a SEAL for 20 years and some change. I came into the Navy back in 94, went to BUDS class 203, which is basic underwater demolition SEAL training. Made it through that class 203. We started with probably 180 guys. We finished with 28. And then I went on to Special Operations Medical School and then went to SEAL Team 3. I operated with famous names like Chris Kyle, Glenn Doherty that died in Benghazi, Ty Woods died in Benghazi. And then from there, I went out to the NSA. I hung my hat in D.C. for a couple of years working in that interagency realm. And then I went down to SEAL Team 6, where I finished my career and then retired from. And obviously, 20 years as a SEAL, you get to go to all the destination spots around the globe, like most military guys, and do a lot of fun stuff. It was a good time. I wouldn't change a thing. And here I am now. I've been retired for about almost 2 years now.
Wow, that's great. Hey, I got to ask, we've seen all the TV shows and documentaries and books about Navy SEAL training and BUDS. Is there any one thing that gets most guys going through BUDS and why they drop out?
I mean, it's very individual. Sometimes it's an injury, but when it comes to the mental aspect and why people quit, it's just the wet, cold aspects of it that never goes away. And every morning when you kick off the day, you know that no matter what, you're going to end up in that ocean, wet and sandy. That part of it, I think, is what drives most guys straight to the bell. Usually people quit like either early in the morning. It's that anticipation of what they experienced the day prior. And they're like, forget it, I'm out of here.
I can't take another day.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Cold, wet, and miserable. Okay. Yeah. So as you got close to the end of your Navy SEAL career, you were starting, were you thinking about, as you got out in your transition, were you thinking about getting a JOB, or were you starting to get the entrepreneurial bug?
No, I'd always been an entrepreneur. I mean, since high school, I was either mowing lawns or doing other things that kind of got me into the, I'll rather work for myself spirit. And then while I was in the Navy, as you know, on deployments, you can rack up a lot of great ideas, okay, when I get out, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. So for me, it was, all right, what's the best use of my resume? Really, I'm a SEAL. Okay. I've got all this combat experience, leadership experience, management experience, but it's all kind of in that military vertical, and some of it applies to the outside. A whole lot of it does not. So I knew, all right, well, SEALs, what do? We get out, we do contract work, we stand on walls, we protect people, and I didn't want to do any of that. But I knew that if you're a SEAL, then working in some form of the security or crisis management world is just what makes sense. And plus, it's still kind of interesting. And so I started looking up, all right, what are all the organizations that, are kind of leaders in the outside, in the civilian sector as it relates to security? And I came across ASIS, which is the American Society of Industrial Security, but they kind of got rid of the actual definition and they just call it as is. And then they have a lot of certifications, CPP, PSP, a bunch of letters you can put behind your name that means you know something about security. So I started reading the books and getting educated and started going to their conferences in my off time. I'm still in the Navy. And then, for those smarter guys out there, you can, depending on what you do for a living, you can intertwine some of this education into, what you do in the military. For me as a SEAL, it made sense. Hey, I want to go to this security conference. They're talking about, whether it's alarm systems or, fence lines. And so I went, and so some of it, the military kind of covered down on because it made sense for my job description. Mm-hmm. As I got deeper into it, then I had to start coming out of pocket with it. And then I got some of the certifications. I continued to get educated. And the goal was, all right, I'll go get out and I'll be like a global security director for like a Fortune 500 company. But as I went to more and more of these conferences, I started realizing, like, God, this is it. This is all that's offered to corporate America as far as services and products. And I really didn't see much. So to me, it was like there was this huge gap. And that's when I started my concept, really at the time, which equated to a book. I'd been traveling the globe. And someone once told me, like, hey, if you want to be considered a subject matter expert in something, you got to write a book. And so
True.
I put together a book called Escape the Wolf. And it was all about escaping all those threats that you may face when traveling abroad. And so I put it together. I self-published it because it really wasn't good enough to get published. But nevertheless, it forced me to kind of put my own philosophy on paper. And then when I self-published it, it kind of gave it a cover and all this and that. And then I only sold it to, defense contractors and other people that they actually would hand it out to their employees as kind of a, pre-deployment or, anybody who was going on a trip overseas, they'd kind of get this book handed to them. And so it didn't take long before it got into the hands of the security director of the Wall Street Journal. And he called me up one day and he said, hey, the stuff that you put in this little book, I was wondering, can you teach all of my journalists this? And this was just after the Danny Pearl incident. And so I was like, well, I'm in the Navy. I don't think I could pull that off. He said, well, come up with a way. And so remotely, I started doing research on e-learning and e-learning developers. And so I sent them my book and I said, hey, can you take my book and turn it into e-learning? And the guy was like, sure. And so he gave me his quote. And then I took that quote, I pretty much doubled it, and I sent it to the Wall Street Journal. So that was
simple math, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what I'm doing, but sure, I'll figure it out, And so I sent that quote to the Wall Street Journal, and they said, sure. And then at that point, I was like, damn, I should have charged more.
Yep.
So anyway, once I had a very rudimentary contract in place, I went ahead and got the e-learning developed, and then we deployed it onto the Wall Street Journal servers, and then there it was, off to the races. And it's important to note that, so the book, like this little, it really isn't much, but it turned into a company, and it's kind of the best case investment that you could make into yourself, where you write something and then someone reads it and ask for more, really. And, you always kind of, that entrepreneurial, it's always a great idea to you, and you kind of hope that it's a great idea to everyone else. You just don't know until somebody writes you a check. So all of those big question marks were lingering. And then once one person buys it, you go, okay, well, I wonder if that was it. Is anybody else going to buy this? So I started kind of trying to professionalize things best I could while I was, still in the Navy. I was still deploying. While I was deployed, I'd just burn it at both ends. I'd operate at night and then work on my company during the day. So there is plenty of time on deployments to kind of, look out for yourself, especially if you're short and final and you got, I'd say 5 years out, start, putting your plan together and then start executing on it with milestones, just like anything else we do, and stick to it. And so anyway, the journal deployed it onto their servers, and then I started formalizing things. And now today, Escape the Wolf, here I am only a year and a half out, but now I've got, several Fortune 500 companies, a whole bunch of, bigger middle-sized companies and some small businesses as well that have become, regular clients now. So I'm building, that was Safe Travel Abroad program for the Wall Street Journal. That extended to companies like JCPenney's that have merchandisers that go overseas. It's now also, we're doing crisis management planning, pandemic planning, active shooter, and we're doing not just education, but also building the policies, because a lot of companies, they'll kind of build a workplace violence program, but it's all kind of cut and paste and it really isn't tailored. So we tailor everything to the client. We build all the education, e-learning, videos, you name it. Now we do it all. And everything is branded with the company's branding on it. You don't even see Escape the Wolf anywhere. And so, that's where I'm at now. But it came with some pain. Here I am. I was at SEAL Team 6. This is a great story. The book No Easy Day comes out. Okay. And people that know that book, it's the Bin Laden operation, written by the pseudonym Mark Owen. Well, he was in the squadron next door to me.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote the book. He got out. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't get it reviewed. And so I think everyone else knows the story after that. Well, the commanding officer at the time couldn't do anything to him because he was out. He turned his sights on anybody inside the command that was doing anything extracurricular.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And then,
just hold that thought for a second, because this comes up a lot on the podcast, not even for guys doing super secret type stuff. If you're just in the military and you're looking and thinking and spending time outside the military, especially if you're like, it's okay to go get a job at the movie theater or McDonald's on the weekend. That's usually acceptable. But if you start a business, or if you put something out there on the internet or a website, even if it's allowed, you never know if your boss, your CO, the upper command, whatever, is going to have a hard time with it. And this is a perfect example. And of course, you guys are dealing with a much more extreme scenario here. But okay, so continue on. I just wanted to mention that a lot of military guys are very hesitant about putting themselves out there for anything, for just because of the fact that they're in the military.
Yeah.
So it is a problem.
It is. It hamstrings you a little bit, unless, of course, you do it the right way. There's the right way and there's the wrong way. The right way. Anyway, so when the commanding officer couldn't do anything to, quote unquote, Mark, they turned inward. I was one of 22 guys that ended up, raising my right hand. I've got my rights read to me. Had a 3-month investigation and everything I had going on. And, I was the only one that survived it. And the reason being is because I went into the JAG's office, right? And I filled out the paperwork requesting permission to start my company and get it's just one form, and it's kind of ridiculous, but the form is basically at the top says, outside financial earnings. And you have to request permission to earn outside financial earnings, whether it's a rental property or, delivering pizzas. It's something that is required, whether they tell you any of this or not. It's just, that's the funny part about all this is we're real good about doing continuing education and quarterly PowerPoint, e-learning things on whether it be, force protection or workplace violence or sexual harassment, but they conveniently forget to tell you about the stuff when you want to start a business. But either way, I had investigated it, went and filled out the paperwork, and it was...
So you went back and did this before you ever got into this stuff. You started with that. You filled out that paperwork?
I did. But the funny part is I forgot that I did it, right? So then when I get pulled up under investigation and everything, it wasn't towards the end that I remembered. And so, here's 2-3 months of stress I'm under because I'm like, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. And then I remembered I had 5 signatures from my chain of command saying I could. I went and got it, gave it to them. And I said, hey, you didn't happen to see this during your investigation, did you? And they're like, no. And
wow, dude, that's like having the Trump card, man, just to get out of jail free card. Boom. Now what you going to do?
Yes. And that's exactly what happened. But I tell you, it's fill out the paperwork, get permission, because it is well worth it. So that way hey, Clint,
I got to tell you, I've been in this veteran entrepreneur space for like 3 years. I've done over 140 interviews with veteran entrepreneurs. This is the first I've ever heard of that form or anything about that. I had no idea.
Exactly. And that is the problem inside, because it's across the armed forces, is that it all falls under ethics. And it's a very small portion of ethics about, hey, if you're going to go get a side job, you have to fill out this form. And you've got to ask, respectfully request permission too. You got to fill out a chit with it. And then you pass it up your chain of command, and then that's it. And it's a small little thing, but it's the one thing that'll save you when even if you mistakenly, let's say, post something. Let's say you stand up some social media for your new company and you start posting stuff, and it's not in line with what anybody else wants, or somebody stumbles across it and tells on you. It's that paperwork that saves you. And anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I do remember, like, over my 24 years as a Marine, some young Marines would get approval from the CO to get a side job or something, but I didn't realize there were actually predetermined forms and stuff for all that. So, man, That's a good nugget to have there.
Yeah. But anyway, that made all the stress go away, and I was able to continue moving forward with my company and getting it up and running before I even got out. And then obviously that's kind of I think that's everybody's anybody who's got that entrepreneurial spirit, wants to develop something and it come to life and it make money so that you don't have to go work for someone else. So there you go. That's my short story.
Wow. Hey, I have to ask you about the e-learning. You said that you sent them your book and they turned it into e-learning. What'd they do? Just like create PowerPoint slides out of the content that was in your book, and so had somebody narrate it, or what?
Kind of. It's totally different programs, but PowerPoint is probably the closest kind of, thing it models. But there's developers that will take and graphically, you're talking about taking content and turning it into something entertaining, but also informative, or else you'll lose your students, for lack of better words, or whoever it is, your client.
Right.
So yeah, they took it and they made you feel like when you're taking it, it's all very interactive. You're clicking on the screen, you're moving things around. There's sound as if you're overseas for certain portions of it. If there's a portion when It talks about cultural awareness. So it'll have all the different cultures on the screen and proper handshakes and eye contact so that you don't upset anyone, and how to make friends and allies. But anyway, it had everything that I learned put into it. And then, it turned out really well. And now we develop e-learning all the time for different companies. Most companies have what's called an LMS, or a learning management system that they leverage, and then we just hang it on there, and then their employees take it.
So at some point you started, so you've been working with Escape the Wolf. That's still your company, but you've also come up with another book recently, right? Yeah.
So I was putting all these great best practices together for all these companies. And I was like, well, how do I get some of this information out to consumers in a entertaining, informative way? And that's where 100 Deadly Skills kind of came to life. And now these are a series published book collection through Simon & Schuster. The one thing I also learned a long time ago with this entrepreneurial stuff is, once you get in a lane, you stay in it. Don't get distracted by shiny objects, because, so my lane really is, it's all about kind of self-reliance, self-rescue, increasing your security posture. Stop relying on just 911. There's 911, and then there's a whole bunch of other things you should be doing. And so the books, 100 Deadly Skills, is now, really a manifestation of taking Escape the Wolf best practices, but putting them into, down at the consumer level, so that every ordinary man or woman, mother, father, son, daughter, can now take on all these skills and be a little bit more vigilant, be a little bit more violent, depending on the threat that faces them.
Right. And is the easiest place to find your book on Amazon?
It is. All the links are at 100deadlyskills.com. There's Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. And if you're passing through any of the airports, make sure you go to Hudson News. They're everywhere at the airport as well.
All right. I'll look for it. I got a copy a couple weeks ago before we did the interview, and I've been looking through it, man. It's good stuff. I'll try to put a link to the Amazon on my show notes if somebody wants to look at it. So,
sure.
So what can you tell us about writing a book? I mean, there's a lot of military guys who are like, I want to write a book someday, but very few of us actually end up doing it.
Well, I mean, if you haven't noticed, every SEAL gets out and writes a book. So, I mean, I felt like I needed to join that club. But,
right.
No, I think, once again, determine your lane, determine what you want to be the expert in, because a book becomes really a business card. It's the ultimate business card, a book, if it's well thought out and put together right, then it leads to, going and doing keynotes. You go talk to people and make, $15,000 for an hour at a luncheon. It leads to guys in Hollywood calling you and saying, hey, let's turn this into some kind of TV show. A book truly can launch whatever it is that you're doing up to a different level. And a whole bunch of stuff comes about that's completely unexpected. So you really need to make sure that when you put it together, don't be the same as everyone else. Be creative. Think outside the box. The title means everything. 100 Deadly Skills it's kind of got that sexiness. It's got that allure. The cover is a little World War II-ish. The drawings inside are very retro. And then, of course, the actual narratives that describe every skill are written in a very, gender-neutral way. It's easy for us SEALs to get out and write books that are very aggro, violent, but that only really, like these memoirs that guys write, it spikes once and then it goes away. So if you're going to write a book, especially coming out of the military, don't do a memoir. Save the memoir for last. Do what I call longevity books. These little 100 Deadly Skills survival books will be on shelves for decades. But a memoir will only be on shelves maybe a year or two. If you're Chris Kyle, yeah, it'll go for 5 or 6 years. If you're Marcus Luttrell, with Lone Survivor, these are just part of the times. If we didn't have, all this combat and post 9/11 stuff going on, then none of these SEAL books would mean a damn thing. So pick something that's going to, one, make you an expert, and two, it has some longevity, because you just don't want to, basically, for lack of better words, blow your load and then nobody knows who you are after that.
Yeah.
So that's first. Identify what it is you really want to be an expert in, and then that's what you write about. Unless, of course, you want to write novels and all that. That's totally different. I don't even know where to begin. The other big piece to the book before I, decided to do it was I knew I didn't want to write about operations. I didn't want to write about secrets. I didn't want to write about my dead buddies. I don't believe in profiting off all that crap. And so, but putting together, life-saving skills in a fun way. The illustrator I had did all the storyboarding for Breaking Bad and Walking Dead. I mean, he's awesome. Which makes the book even more unique. And then both books, 100 Deadly Skills, number 1, 100 Deadly Skills, number 2. Number 2 is the survival edition, which that's the one that tackles all the headlines, spire terrorism, ransomware, virtual kidnappings, express kidnappings, and then it goes back to the basics too with survival. But anyway, and then structurally, for me it was easy because I was like, okay, I need 100 deadly skills. I'm going to put 100 skills together. I just started brainstorming. I came up with, almost 300. And then I narrowed it down to the top 100 for the first book. And then the second book got the second 100 of them. And for me, it's a very easy, it's not chapters. It's not a story. I don't have to worry about, linking a whole bunch of information together. There's no timeline to it. I mean, you literally can open up any of my books in the middle and learn something, and you don't have to read what was before or after it to understand it, So I like to keep things simple, which is how the books turned out. Easily digested and easily retained,
Yeah, so you're talking about having the illustrator was able to storyboard it for you. I mean, how did you get access to people like that and actually get a publisher behind you, I guess more or less from the beginning, right?
Yeah, so this is where networking is so important, because I had a friend that in non-SEAL, just a good friend of mine who had written some books, and they did okay, and he had an agent. I highly recommend getting an agent. They're going to charge you 15%, but of whatever they get for your book. So the process, people don't know this, is you get really everything that you want is in New York. And so you want to get a literary agent. A literary agent his job is to take your proposal. Okay. A lot of people, what they do is they think you're supposed to write a book and then try and get published. That is not how it works. What you do is you have an idea. So my idea was 100 deadly skills. I pulled some sample artwork off of Google, and then I put together some sample narratives on, hey, this is how I'm going to write about each skill. And then I put together a comparison. This book is going to be a lot like Bear Grylls' book, or it's going to be a lot like the SAS survival book, except better. Now then you take the proposal, which is a whole 6 pages, and you hand it off to an agent. The agent will then go sell the idea of this book. Then once you've got money, once you have a contract, now you have a year to write the book. A lot of people waste time building a book. And when you build the book, you don't even know if anyone's going to buy it or like it. And so it's better to have an agent go shop it around, a proposal, or go shop the proposal around, then you write the book. Because like I said, you and I, we have a lot of great ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean the world is going to think it's a great idea. So you have to give it to an agent who knows what everybody likes. And if he doesn't like it, the beauty of an agent is he'll tell you, change this, change that, and then send it back to me. But he's not going to shop it around unless he knows it can sell. So I had a dozen once I gave him the proposal, he shopped it to every publisher in New York. I had about a dozen of them come back with bids.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he put them into a bidding war. And so he cranked the number and then it got finally to where Simon and Schuster won. Of course, because they probably have the biggest pockets in New York. And then you turn around, you sign a contract, and then so you'll get your what's called an advance, and the advance is whatever the total number of the contract is. Let's say it's $100,000. The day that you sign the contract, you get $33,000. The day that you turn in your manuscript, you get $33,000, and then the day that book is on shelves, you get your remaining $33,000. Then, when the book starts selling, you don't get a royalty until the publisher makes their $100,000 back in book sales. And that doesn't mean if a book sells for $20 that every $20 pays them back. It's a percentage of the book price, which for me is $1.33. That's a whole lot of books you have to sell. $1.33 per book goes towards you paying them back. Wow. So it's a win-win. But the reason I say that is because the retainer, don't sell yourself short and just take let's say it's, $20,000, because you may not sell that many books. You might as well, collect as high of an advance as you can, because the book industry is a tough world right now, But anyway, it's quite the process, and I would say that too, pay attention when you're signing contracts. You only want to give them the rights for them to profit off of the book that they built. You do not want to give up your movie rights, TV show rights, there's a whole lot of there's gaming, there's always an option for a game. What you don't want to do is sign a lot of those rights away to the publisher, because those are all things that belong to you as being the creator of the book.
Oh yeah. So if you don't end up selling, if you don't end up paying them back the $100,000, for example, you still get to keep the $100,000. If you sell so many books, you go way beyond that, you still continue to get $1.33 per book beyond $100,000. Exactly.
You will get, so $1.33 is on the payback, but on the royalty side, it's usually around, depending on what you negotiate, anywhere between 7 to 15% of each book.
Okay.
And that is for the rest of your life. So that's the beauty of just take your time and put together a home run. And then, you're talking, and that's why the other reason to do a longevity book, a memoir, you'll make a bunch off a memoir without a doubt. But, your first year or two, and then after that, it's crickets. You're not going to get any checks after that.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. I've known a lot of guys that have written books, but I've never had anybody spell it out like that for me before. That's awesome.
Well, there's tactics. And one thing I've learned is that no matter what you do, there's always like this whole other tactical world to take advantage of, but you just have, I had to ask. And here's another thing for anybody who's got books out there. You can, in order to make your book, this is the best trick I've learned so far. On Amazon, they have bestsellers and all that based on the numbers sold. Well, one of the tricks I learned, because it was happening to me, my first book became a New York Times bestseller. And so it was like a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 on the Amazon list for weeks. It was doing really well. And then I started noticing, on Amazon, when you buy something, it said, then right at the bottom, it'll say, oh, and buy this and this as well.
Yeah.
It'll give you suggestions on other things. Well, that's because with my book, I noticed that when people were buying it, my competition was popping up with my book. And so I asked my publisher, how is that possible? Is Amazon that smart? And I go, no, the publishers do that. You take that meta tag information from a best-selling book, all right? And then you tack it on to your poorly selling book. And then what happens is every time somebody buys that best-selling book with its meta tag information, the same meta tag information causes the worst selling book to pop up right next to yours. So if you want to make your book on Amazon or your product a bestseller, all you do is go take the meta tag information from the best-selling product in your vertical, tack it onto your product, and all of a sudden your product will be offered with the best-selling one every time somebody buys it.
Yeah, and get all that exposure. Okay,
Yeah.
So I got to ask, whatever the dollar amount is or was, have you made it past that threshold on your 100 Deadly Skills book?
Yeah, the first book, in the first year, they basically made all their money back, I think within 9 months, which is kind of fast. And then book 2 is well on its way. Book 2 already had 110,000 pre-sales before it even came out. So,
yeah, that probably helps. If you got a number 2, you can market it to the first group of people. If you can get pre-sales, they obviously know how many to publish and to get printed right away to fill the pre-sales. So that's awesome.
On your first book, it's you just go for it. And then, you have to you can't rely on the publisher. You gotta get out there and hustle yourself to a certain degree. So if you have relationships with like different blogs, websites, podcasts, you got to get yourself on them, talk about it, and just get that awareness up. And if the first one does well, then the second one will be, it'll eventually do as well. And then once you get into a series, then, oh hell, if they got the first one, the second one, they're going to want the third and the fourth one to complete their collection. So
yeah. Okay, so where are you at now? Like, what do you think you're going to be doing? Are you just going to be writing more books, or you still doing Escape the Wolf type consulting, or what?
Yeah, so Escape the Wolf is kind of the day job. The books I knock out. It doesn't take long once you get an idea going. So I can knock out that second book I did in 4 months, and so that's illustrations, the writing, everything. So you dedicate basically a couple hours a day to writing and all that. And then next is probably book number 3, 100 Deadly Skills. And then it's looking like it might be turned into a TV show next year, but we're still working the deal on that.
Really? Wow. Is MacGyver going to be the main character?
Yeah. Well, right now the working title of this thing is Kill or Be Killed. And so it's really a TV show that's putting skills to the test and increasing more awareness, how to get out. It's kind of a combination of both 100 Deadly Skills and, Escape the Wolf, putting people through active shooter scenarios and different threats and seeing how they do. And I don't know which network, it'll either be NBC or the Esquire network.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
So I got another question for you in the regards of writing a book. You write all your stuff out, you do your drawings, you kind of storyboard it, whatever. Anyways, when you hand it to them, like, do they comb through it and they change some of your verbs around and change some of your adjectives, and they make changes and cuts and corrections, or do you write it in such a thorough way that they pretty much don't touch it?
So what I did, I had to hire an illustrator, right? Illustrator's going to do illustrations. And then I would highly recommend anyone that's not a good writer or doesn't trust their writing ability is to get a ghostwriter. And what that is there's a lot of freelance writers out there. You find one that, you can go to, I think, there's different websites like outsource.com or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but you basically can find a ghostwriter, and it's varying. They can play editor and proofreader. And that's, basically when you get done, you hand it off to them. They spend a couple of weeks combing through it, cleaning it up for you, but maintaining your language, your voice. Or you can have a ghostwriter write the entire thing. It's like Chris Kyle didn't write one bit of his book. Marcus Luttrell did not write one bit of his book. Brandon Webb.
Really?
And all. all these SEALs that have written books, you'll notice that it says, their name, Marcus Luttrell, with, and then it has another name. The other name is the ghostwriter. Then, so the beauty of it is if you're not a writer, you just get on the phone with a writer and you talk for a couple of hours. And what they do is they record the conversation and then they retype it all and then they start piecing it together into the book. And before you know it, 100, 200 phone calls later, the ghostwriter will have written your entire book for you and you never had to type anything.
I had no idea it was that. I mean, I figured it was done through interview process, or maybe you hand them a shell of a document you put together and they kind of fill in the rest and make it sound pretty, that kind of thing. But I guess it makes sense if that guys just did it through audio type stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's, we all outsource in some form or fashion. And that's pretty much an author's way of outsourcing is you go hire an illustrator, you hire a writer, you're the puppet master. And then you give everybody their timelines. You manage it until you get to the finish line. You take all that information, you turn it over to the publisher. The publisher will hand it to the editing department. They will go through it as well. Once they're satisfied that there's no mistakes, page numbers are the right page number, and they'll build the table of contents for you. And then once the table of content and all the stuff is edited, and they'll hand it over to their general counsel. General counsel will then go through the book, make sure there's no issues there, and then you're done. And then if you're a military guy and if you're writing about anything military-like, well, then you have to submit it to the Pentagon. The Pentagon will then send it to all the commands that you served at. All those commands, SSOs, will take a look at it, make sure there's no secret information, and then give the Pentagon the thumbs up. And then the Pentagon will then give you a letter saying, yep, you're good to go with no redactions. And then you go, and now you're off to the races. Time to publish.
Is that even if you're like out of the military or retired, whatever, do they still do that?
Oh, hell yeah. If you're out and you write anything that's military oriented, it's just it's not mandatory. So the CIA and the FBI, it's mandatory. You have to get it reviewed. What they've done in the military is say that it's highly recommended. Well, that's kind of a problem because now it gives guys flexibility. Like, well, it's just recommended. They're not saying I have to. And then you have guys like, Mark Owen or No Easy Day go out and write that book with all kinds of classified crap in it, when all he had to do was go get it reviewed. And the review process isn't there to hurt you. It's there to protect you. And it literally takes 45 days. My book was reviewed in 30 and they didn't redact anything. And I didn't even need to send it in, but I did it anyway, just to be safe.
Yeah. Wow. That's good information. I was at the Army's Command General Staff College, and this guy got in trouble because he had put together a great paper and he'd pulled all this information from non-secret sources. But when you put it all together into one document, it almost became secret because it was so well put together, and that created an issue. And that was actually at a military school, but it had actually gotten published before, and then all of a sudden started getting a lot of attention. So you got to be careful with what you're doing. So, anyways, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of our time. We're actually going over a little bit, but I'd love to talk to you more about writing books because you got some really good inside information that I haven't heard before. So give us one little shout out for your book and where we can find it. If we're not roaming around on Amazon, like I said, I'll try to put the link in my show notes for your book. And then also, if you could finish with, what advice would you have for future veterans or veterans that are going through a transition right now that might be thinking about writing a book or starting their own business?
Well, sure. So the books can be found at 100deadlyskills.com. Anybody interested in my company, it's escapethewolf.com. All the links are there to Barnes & Noble or, any place books are sold, Walmart, Barnes & Nobles, any place, you can find my books. And as far as advice, entrepreneurial, just generally, start as soon as you can. You can't start early enough, especially if you're still in the military. start trying to bring your idea to life. Make sure you get permission so that you don't have any drama on your way out. And then second, network. I mean, I made sure that, every person you shake hands with, get a business card, stay in touch with people, because even though they don't seem like maybe anybody that you might not need to leverage anytime soon, I tell you, there's been more times than not I've gone through my pile of business cards and they're like, someone I never thought I'd need to contact, I contact. So start soon, build a great network, and then, don't get distracted. My dad always told me, like, do what you love, and if you love it, you'll be good at it, and if you're good at it, the money will follow.
Great advice, man. Great advice. I was going to make a joke about that, but it's like, okay. There's something about go to college and get a degree in something you love, and that way you'll never have to work a day in your life. ... because no one's hiring in that field. But
yeah, there you go.
But it's great advice. It's all about, find something that you can do, especially if you can be twisted in a way where you're actually helping other people or informing or teaching other people something valuable. And if you do it right and you're good at it, the money will follow. If you focus on nothing but the money, then you'll never produce a quality product because you'll always be worried about the money.
Yeah, and if you do something you're not familiar with or passionate about, you'll fall on your face because the competition is everywhere, So, which is a good thing. Capitalism is driven by competition. So, you want some competition, blue ocean strategy, read some MBA books. You don't need to go get an MBA. I don't have an MBA. I've got friends that got MBAs from all over the place, and they don't know the first thing about starting a business. But but go out and read them. There's great, like, Blue Ocean Strategy. It's a great book. And you can kind of bounce your own business ideas against its philosophy and know if you're going on a more successful route or not. I mean, there's tons of information out there.
That's awesome, Clint. Well, we could probably talk for hours, but unfortunately, we try to keep it under 30 minutes, and we've gone over by about 16 minutes at this point. So got to cut it off, man. All right, Clint, well, congratulations on your books and everything else, and stay in touch and let us know how things are going.
Okay. Thanks for having me, buddy. Take care.
All right. We're out. As you can tell from listening to the Veteran on the Move podcast, interviews are a great way to tell your story and spread the word about your business. If you would like to get booked as a podcast guest, I recommend Interview Valet. You can check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.